What's up, everybody? It's Goddess Z, and I'm here with another podcast episode. I hope everybody has been taking care of themselves, mind, body, and spirit, because that's what it's all about. If either one of those things are out of balance, then we are out of balance, and we don't want that. And we talk about all sorts of things on this podcast from divine feminine healing, ancestral healing, ancestral wisdom, esoteric alchemy, anything that kind of pertains to that mind, body, spirit integration. So if this is your first time hopping on this podcast and you're into those types of subjects, be sure to hit that like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And this podcast is available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere that podcasts are aired. And then, of course, we do have these podcasts dropping now every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On the second and fourth, it's usually me coming in with some downloads and transmissions, a solo episode. And on the first and the third Fridays, I have a guest, a special guest sharing their wisdom. And that is what we're going to be doing today. This is episode 56, and I'm going to be sitting down with Kiuna Hines. Kiana is a womb healer, holistic health educator, and spiritual teacher with 10 plus years of experience guiding women back to their divine center. She's the founder of Nourishment 101, the author of the 12-week health recovery guide and creating the need for an answer, and creator of the Womb Wisdom app, a digital sanctuary for feminine healing and energetic liberation. Okay. On this episode, we're going to be talking about hormonal rhythms as sacred cycles, why womanhood is not defined by bleeding, the womb as an altar and of intuition and healing, and ancestral remembrance through womb connection. Let me tell you something, ladies, my divine feminine, my matriarchs, my goddesses, queens. You do not want to miss this episode, okay? It was such a joy and an honor to sit down with her. She really schooled me on quite a few topics as it pertains to the womb, but really, I felt like there was something deeper going on energetically after our conversation. So be sure to check out this full conversation all the way to the end. It's absolutely phenomenal and transformational, okay? And if you're impatient like me, be sure to just hop on over about 4 minutes in and you will jump right into today's episode and you can hear my guests and I going and diving deep into those transmissions, downloads, and esoteric wisdom. So before that, I want to go ahead and get just a little bit of business out of the way. I just already let you guys know that this podcast episode is dropping every Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Super excited about that. We just started doing that September of this year. And then also, I'm going to be having a master class on Wednesday, September the 24th. It's the Scripture and Conjure the Bible through the Hoodoo lens. So you definitely want to, let me make sure I said that right, because I got to check my own stuff, y'all. Scripture and Conjure the Bible in Hoodoo tradition, okay? All this information, as well as my guest information, will be down in the description so you can check our respective platforms out and see what we got going on. But this class is already filling up very quick. I think I only have like two more early bird tickets left. So go ahead and check that out. If it resonates with you, be sure to sign up. It's going to be epic. The ancestors are planning some amazing things already that are coming up through me for this class, and I'm really excited about it. So I think that is it. And actually, we can just go ahead and jump into today's episode. All right, all right. So, welcome, Kiana, to the Holistic and Spiritual AF podcast. I really appreciate you joining me and my audience today. I've been chatting with you a little bit before the show, and you're really sweet. I like your energy. I really do.
Thank you so much. Happy to be
You're
here.
good, good. And I'm happy to have you. You are doing some really important work, a lot of important work. And like I said, I saw you out there on the TikTok and Instagram streets, really spreading the message on some important things. You're talking about the construction of the divine temple, womb wellness, which is very important for all women actually, womb wisdom, and talking about the difference in the hormonal rhythms, the Holy Trinity, Mother, Father, Child, and sacred geometry. So you have a very interesting toolkit, and I'm very interested to see like how all of this got started for you. Like, how did you feel the call in this particular sector of healing?
Well, First of all, thank you for opening a window for the information to even get out there. I appreciate you holding space for the message and for me. The way that I got started was much like a lot of people, probably just stumbling into things, but deciding to listen for once, pay attention, and stop going against myself, which is how I got into health. I started at the age of 27. I was having my second child, who's now 16. My eldest is 24. He just turned 24. And
Girl,
yeah.
I thought you were 24, and that's no shade. I was like, when you said that, I was like, girl, you look good. You look really good. And
Thank
that's
you. Thank you. I'll be 44 in November. But I attribute that to the information that Spirit led me to at the age of 27. Again, I was having my second child. And then I was diagnosed with cancerous cells in my uterus. At
Mm,
that point, that had been an ongoing thing for all the women on my mother's side of the family. And so I started asking questions like, I've been healthy my whole life, so I thought. So what is this HPV? I'm like just hearing this for the first time. And then when I started thinking back, all the women on my mother's side of the family had uterine issues before the age of 30. They either had hysterectomies, cysts, fibroids, and I got scared. I was like, okay, it's something we're doing to ourselves, or it's either our body's failing us or our mind's failing our body. It's one of the two. So I started investigating. Um, I was inspired to change my entire diet. And I was so determined. I grew up playing sports. So once I get something in my mind, I have to see it through. I have to see it out. I was never allowed to give up or quit. And at that point, my goal was my health. It was me. That changed everything because once I changed my diet, not only did the cancerous cells go away, but some other issues that I was having, like I kept having yeast infections, uterine infections. I had bacterial vaginosis. I didn't understand how any of this was happening. But once I changed my diet, it cleared everything up. And so I also noticed that once I changed my diet, my menstrual cycle changed.
mm.
It went from 7 days down to like 4 days. I was like, wait a second. So, what I put in my body affects my cycle?
Mhm.
Nobody ever taught me that. I started paying very close attention. And then I stopped eating dairy. Once I stopped eating dairy, like all the cheese and milk, my cycle went down again. In other words, the less junk I put in my body, the less I bled. So I knew at that point that bleeding was synonymous with something that I was doing to myself. At that point, um, I started doing energy work. When I started doing the energy work, I cleared up some trauma, stopped bleeding completely at the age of 36. And I had bled all my life. I was told that this was normal, that this was something that was a sign and epitome of women's health. So that kind of it changed and opened my eyes to show me that bleeding meant something completely different from what I thought it meant, that we've been lied to and misled, like in just about everything else. And that's where my research started. So I'll pause there to see if there's anything.
Wow. That's so amazing. And like, you know what? And that's why I always ask people because when you guys start telling your story, I start getting this downloads. Like, and then my ancestors are like, see, that's why we picked her. And I'm like, yeah, her ancestors chose her, like, because like you said, the women in your family had this have been generational, just going down the line. And I'm glad that you talked about changing your diet. Like, when you say changing your diet, like how did you change your diet the first time?
So I just stopped eating meat for one.
Okay.
I gave up pork, gave up chicken, I gave up fish. I gave up anything that could actually run or swim away from you if you if you tried to chase it. Okay,
Yeah.
gave it all up. Um, And then I also started paying more attention to my emotions and my feelings. That changed. That's what really changed everything. And but definitely stop putting things on my body that I could not put in my body. That means I had to stop wearing lotion, fingernail
Mhm.
polish, fake fingernails. I went natural and started wearing my own hair. Literally everything that I felt I could not eat or did not come from the earth or grow from the earth without having to be altered, I just stopped fooling with. And that's what going natural and what I call earth prescriptions. I started
Yeah.
only taking earth prescriptions. If it didn't grow from the earth, then I was like reading it to see what it was and how it affected me and
Mhm.
looking up definitions. I became certified in holistic nutrition and understanding what a holistic lifestyle actually meant and looked like for me.
I love that. And you know what? And that's why I'm glad you're here because I do a lot on the spiritual side on this podcast, and it is called Holistic and Spiritual. I wanted to talk about how the integration of these things and how we eat and what we do to our bodies on the physical side of things actually enhance the spiritual side as well. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about cleaning out the vessel. You're talking about cleaning out the temple and a lot of people don't realize that helps us on a cellular level to be able to receive things spiritually. And everybody starts, we all start where we can start. In your situation, you had a very specific something to work on, so you were like, hey, I'm cutting this out, and you started noticing the changes in your body, and you just went completely natural. I know for me, I'm plant based. I always say that because I still eat fish too, um, but not that much. I may eat fish like maybe once or twice a month. But I started out how many years ago now? 12 years ago? Yeah, 12 years ago. And I did the same thing. I don't know how it got started. It just was the community I was with. And I stopped pork first. That's usually the first. And then other things started to go. And then I was going like plant based, cut out the dairy. And like you said, I noticed all kinds of benefits and changes from that: better sleep, better skin, more energy. I didn't have, and then also I did notice the changes in my menstrual cycle as well. I did. That was one of the things that I noticed because I was always really heavy, and something clearly was abnormal about that. Because once I changed my diet, it regulated, and things were different. So I love how you talking about that, and that you talked about how that leads you on a journey. I started my locks and all of that stuff, and everybody was like, "Oh, the locks gonna change you," and I was like, I just need something to stop dealing with my hair. But sure enough, I went on a huge spiritual journey after that. So I love that. I love that for you. And you
Thank
sound like you're in
you.
a good place now, and you look great. That's what I was like. I had
Oh,
no way. And then you've got a young voice too, so that helps me to think that yeah, you could definitely
aw.
shave off about 15 years, which is awesome.
It's interesting how all of that affects your hormones.
It
And
does.
because the changes in the food, like you said, it's a spiritual process. You don't really know you're going on one until it hits you one day. You're like, I'm completely different from the person I used to be. And it did when at the age of 30, I went natural. That's when I stopped getting relaxers in my hair. And I didn't actually start my locks though until 2022. So I've only been growing my locks for about 3 years now, but they have definitely added to the whole receiving and
Mhm.
transmission of information. I can definitely attest to that.
Yes, I agree with that. And that's beautiful. I love it. So you said you have children. Well, your children are they also plant-based or did they grow up like that?
My youngest grew up more plant-based than my eldest, but they look at me and they adopt some of the things that I have adopted, seeing that I do get that a lot. Like, your mom doesn't look like, she's old enough to be your mom. And I get that a lot. So they notice and they pay attention, and they're smart boys. So they've adopted some of my practices. But no, the youngest grew up I changed when he was about 5 years old, plant based. And so he typically doesn't eat a lot of meat, but he does still eat junk.
Right, exactly. They yeah, they still gotta, they will do what they want to do. Simple as that.
Right.
And they'll come back
Can't control
around.
it.
That's why I said let their
Exactly.
body tell them. And same thing with my girls. They eat whatever. My youngest one is a little bit more sensitive. She used to tell me when I would fall on and off the wagon with that, she would be the one that's like, let's stop eating meat, you know, because
Mm,
because we would feel it, we would be
right.
tired, digestive system bloated, and all this stuff, and I'd be like, yeah, it's too much meat, and we would go back. She was good with that, but right now both of them eat whatever. So, and I'd let them do them because at one point I was eating whatever too. So, so I get it.
Exactly.
So I love
Exactly.
it. So, you talked about one of the things that you teach, and I think we touched on it a little bit, was the divine tempo. Tell me what that means to you from a spiritual, physical, and energetic perspective.
That's a big one. Um, Recently, I started studying deeply about the body, about the mind and the brain, and how things are constructed. And one thing that I realized is where they miss the mark is they don't really teach us about the brain, the left side, the right side. Well, they don't
Mm,
really teach us much about the body at all. But when I started getting into brain research, I noticed that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. And I wanted to know why. Um, and then I started getting more insight on the left side being the masculine side, the side that is more structural and orderly and controlling, um, the focused on the things that we see, focused on the material world. But there's very little emphasis on the right side, which is where our intuition and creativity and emotions stem from, all the unseen. So here we have the seen on the left and the unseen on the right, and yet they cross at this part of the body that's called decussation. It's right where the medulla oblongata and the pons meet and where they connect the brain with the lower half of the body. So at this point, this particular point, I noticed it looked like a person hanging on a cross. So
mm-hmm,
I started doing a lot of research, and sure enough, every single savior that we have heard about or read about, Jesus, Isis, um, some of the Hindu gods and goddesses, they all are pictured at this part of the body in the brain where there's this cross. It's literally called a cross, and it's a medianship. It's where the upper and the lower meet. It's where the communication between the left and the right brain actually intersect, and it's an X marks the spot type of place. So at this particular place in the body, this is where we have to harmonize the thoughts with the emotions. And if there's any disharmony, that is the fall. That is the
mm-hmm.
crucifixion. That is the part where if the creative side is dropped, then you'll stay focused on logic all the time. You'll stay
Yes.
focused on the mind and the mental. You'll stay focused on the things that you can only see, and you cut out 90% of the rest of the world, which is the feeling world. So the right side of the brain deals with feeling and emotions, makes up everything that we can't see in the unseen, which is vibration, and that's real. And the reason this is so important is because when we don't understand this, we can't figure out why we get sick. When the doctors say, oh, there's no cure, when the doctors say, oh, we don't know what the cause is, 9 times out of 10, it's because there's a miscommunication.
Mm,
9 times out of 10, it's because there's discord and disharmony between the left and the right hemisphere. So this kind of brought me into understanding how the temple is made. I started, reading the Bible, scriptures that kind of backed up what I was seeing and feeling and what spirit was guiding me to. And what really hit for me was understanding that spirit was was feminine, understanding that spirit was
Yes.
breath, understanding that when I learned how to breathe properly, I became inspired and it ignited the right side of my brain. It lit up and I had all of these creative ideas. And that is when my TikToks started changing. That's when my messages started changing. I became a little bit more um, or less shy and I started to come into my own and my TikTok page blew up. But it was literally because I was inspired by how I had now started putting intention into my breath. All of this, goes together. It may
Yes, it
seem
does.
like it's separate, but it really all connects and it all connects to the womb as well. So,
Yes. Oh, girl. I love how you, excuse me, I love how you just effortlessly interweaved that. And as I hear you speaking, and I can just hear the wisdom in you. So you got this baby face, but you got this wisdom about you that lets people know that you your ancestors are speaking through you. And so like you were when you were breaking down the part of the brain that looks like the cross, um, I knew what you were talking about. It was weird. It was like I was receiving the information and I was like, yeah, it was making total sense, even though I didn't have that intellectual information. But you really broke down the right and the left brain. I knew like the concept of that. But when you spoke on when there's dysfunction or there's a misfiring in those areas at the bottom is when illnesses come up, and how we go off and we live this life that's just completely physical and mundane and leaves out the spiritual, the creative, the emotional, and how we can reconnect that with our breath. And that's feminine. I was like, what? She just said, she just said like a sermon, y'all. Like if y'all didn't catch that, there was so many nuggets in that. And I love that. And then you brought it all the way back around to womb wisdom. And so that was what I was going to ask you about next. So I'm glad that you that you talked about that because please tie that together for us.
as you know, being a woman, there's been a lot of suppression in the woman. We're not even seen as co-creators.
Right.
We religion kind of it kind of confiscates the actual logic, the real logic that we're supposed to have, and it makes us think that we come from the rib of a man, which
Mhm.
is really metaphysical. You have to have a body before you can house spirit. So yes, the man in the physical was created first, but in Genesis chapter 1, you'll see that the male and female was already created before the physical, before we were embodied. So when I understood that, I was like, okay, so the masculine and feminine is already present, but the where we get confused is that when the body was made, we feel like the woman came second, and this type of thinking is dangerous
Yes, it
on
is.
so many levels because for one, we're not acknowledged as co-creators, even though you have to come through a woman to even get to this plane.
Yep.
It's not even possible to get here without coming through the black hole, through our portal. And this taught me that the woman's design is in literally every part of nature. Look at the shape of your eyes. Look at the shape of your lips. Look at the shape of your vagina. Look at the
Mhm.
shape of your vocal cords. They all are the shape of a vesica, which
Mhm.
is this oval shape. And every single portal that I just spoke to you about has a black hole. Your eyes have a black hole, your vocal cords have a chamber of a black hole, and everything has the ability to transform something. Light enters your eyes and it comes out as perception, whatever you perceive. And we don't all perceive the same things. When you release sound from your vocal cords, it comes out in your own vibrational voice. It's specific to you. When you have a child or give birth, that child, there's no other person like that child. So the same thing is happening all around nature, but this vesica piscis that's inside encoded inside of us is what we call a resonance chamber, and our wombs are resonance chambers, which means that it resonates with vibration, with feeling. And any little thing that we feel, our womb is going to hold memory on. It's going to echo it in some way. It's going to express it physically, emotionally, and mentally. So we are not really aware of how our bodies work because it was purposely not taught to us that we had this type of potential to connect to the unseen, because it's scary. It's considered chaos. It's considered dangerous when you can't
Hmm.
know what's coming. You have to feel what's coming. People want to know everything. People want to see everything. Well, connection from the known is what actually allows you to connect deeper with spirit and with your womb. Releasing this whole idea that you have to see everything to believe it's real, but start
Yes.
feeling it. When you start feeling it, you start seeing a much bigger picture. So that's when I started coming up on, like, so much information just started being shared with me when I learned how to, like, unlock the trauma from my womb. I started understanding how to move energy around through my body, how to be still, how to rest, how to receive. And all of these are feminine characteristics that I previously didn't have, because I, like most women, I was taught to work, I was taught to think, I was taught to be overly masculinized,
Yes.
using my right hand for everything instead of trying to incorporate my left hand. But the minute I started incorporating my left hand and stuff, it started uniting the hemispheres. So it's unlearning everything and listening to my body. And when I started listening, I had a teacher. They say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear or the master will appear. That's exactly what happened. When I started asking questions and being still to listen to the answers and using my breath intentionally, breathing, taking over the breathing instead of allowing my body to naturally breathe for me, that's when the teacher started showing up every time I started doing breath work. And I would be like, I'm listening. And so that's how my videos started to come, because it was literally me listening to my higher self as and being a student of my higher self. And so that's where the creativity came from.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I love how you just really broke it down. I feel like I have very little to say. Which is good because like I said, you are, embodying this, you're walking this. You talk about your journey in the beginning, how it all started, how you were able to heal certain things about yourself, how it started on the physical, and then how you tapped into breath work on the spiritual, how that rolled into the womb, how so many of us have traumas stored in our wombs, not only from our own life, that we've lived and the things we've gone through, but also what's stored in our DNA, and the traumas that a lot of our ancestors have gone through. So you talked about a tremendous amount of very easy ways that people can tap into this. This is not like, you can't do it. Simple ways of breath work. And then, of course, you broke down the divine feminine. Like you just kind of slipped that on in there. I'm actually reading The Great Cosmic Mother now, and so you broke down how dangerous that is, and I'm right at the part with, how did we get from the primordial womb with everything starting out male and female, female first, to this whole kind of male dominant patriarchal society that is kind of responsible for all of the oppression and wars and everything bad you see, not and not to be distorted with masculinity. Okay, there's a difference
Right.
between masculinity and patriarchy, and
Exactly.
sacred masculinity and toxic masculinity. So yeah, the danger in that, we're living it. We see it everywhere. This is the danger of when you push the woman out, which the womb is actually, like you said, the portal from the unseen, the cosmic,
Absolutely.
to the physical. That's powerful, and that's the problem. Too much power. So we have
That's
to
it.
that's way too much power when you describe it like that. But we don't, the divine feminine, we don't take it like that. We don't think that, oh, look at me, I'm so powerful. This is what we do. What we're here to do. And then of course we take on by mothering the children, the generations and stuff like that. So Amazing, amazing. I love the way you broke that down. Yeah, so I'm so glad you broke that down. I want to kind of go back to you were talking about traumas being stored in the womb. That is such a huge topic, and you talked about how you healed yourself and some trauma stored in your womb. Can you tell us some of the practices that you actually use to do that, as well as like what the experience was like afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'll ask you something that I ask a lot of women. Why do women bleed every month? We've been taught that that was normal, so nobody really asked that question, right?
Mm,
Because it's just something that we do. But outside of an injury to the body, you never see anybody bleeding. So blood is typically seen as a sign that something is wrong, something is either injured or pain is involved, which typically we have pain surrounding our menstrual cycles. And when I started asking this question, because, this was, I stopped the bleeding at the age of 36.
mm,
And so naturally, I thought, just like a lot of women who stop bleeding, like, is something wrong with me? Like, I'm supposed to be bleeding. And then it hit me, and I'm like, the fact that I'm not bleeding, but I think something's wrong with me because I'm not bleeding is A, the problem. B, I'm healthier than I ever have been my whole life. My diet changed. And again, when I said that I started changing what I ate, my period, even you notice that your period, it started to become less and less.
mhm,
It was less and less blood. So actually, I noticed that not bleeding was a sign of health. And bleeding was a sign that my menstrual cycle was a communication from my womb, telling me that there's something deeper. It may not be seen on the surface, but there was some things unseen, which was
mm,
abandonment issues with not having a father figure around, insecurity issues, uh, being overly masculinized, thinking only with my mind and logic and not using my intuition, suppressing that. And when I started to understand the communication, I started listening. Okay. So I started doing the research. And so I noticed that in chimpanzees, which also have a similar gestation period to women, like they carry their children in their wombs the same amount of time that humans do. And they're like considered close relatives to the human species. I noticed that they don't bleed in the wild.
mm,
If they did, that would be very dangerous. But when they're captive and put in the zoos, they start bleeding.
mm,
So then I started seeing, oh, domestication, something to do with being domesticated. They're not eating their natural diets. They feel unsafe. They're not free anymore. That starts suppressing the emotions when you can't do anything
mm,
about it. And when the emotions are suppressed, that's called stagnation. That's energy that becomes trapped, what we call in our chakra centers, when the energy is no longer able to flow and the kundalini can't rise.
right.
That's called stagnation. And when the body has stagnation, which means that it's too masculine, it has direction, but it doesn't have spirit to move. Free spirit can't move. Spirit
The
is
flow.
there.
Yeah.
The flow, right? It's blocked. So that's what happens in the Holy Trinity. When I use electricity as an example, you have mind, which is masculine, you have spirit, which is feminine, and then you have the body, which is the child. But the idea that you have a father son Holy Spirit versus a mother father child, that creates stagnation in the body. That means that there's too much masculinity.
Yeah.
And so the same thing happens when our bodies, but when you look at the Holy Trinity as the mother, father, child versus father, son, Holy Spirit, then you can start getting that internal flame. That's when the electricity flows, because the mind, which is masculine, it's the spark. The mother, which is feminine, it's the spirit, and the body is the child. It's the manifestation of what the mother and the father creates. So only then can you get the flow of electricity, can you get the fire within.
Mm,
That is represented in electricity as negative, neutral, and positive. Okay. That requires polarity in order to flow, in order to create a fire. And the same thing happens inside of us. So when you look at spirit, I want you to look at it as synonymous with air. A fire cannot exist without air, without oxygen. The moment you take a glass and you put it over a candle, what happens? It goes out. So that's the same thing that happens when there's stagnation in the body. You can't get that electrical circuit to flow. You can't get that fire burning. Keep sparking, but there's no movement. So here's the issue inside of our bodies. When we don't add conscious breathing, when we don't add that intentional breathing to our bodies, it's in survival mode. That means that it's just breathing on survival. Your body has to have consciousness in order, or has to have breath in order to have consciousness, because the minute you remove the air, what we call winded, when people get the wind knocked out of them, they lose consciousness.
mm,
So we understand consciousness is synonymous with breath, with breathing. You don't die, but you do lose consciousness if you stop breathing. And when you start breathing again, consciousness comes back. So we have to understand how our bodies are made. We have to understand that that is connected very deeply to how we experience life, how we see the world, how we experience pain, how we experience joy, how we experience happiness, or even how we suffer.
mhm,
And all of this, it really goes back to women being very understanding, or not understanding, but overstanding our place in this universe, our place in the world. If we are not aware how our bodies work and who we are and what role we're supposed to play, then we'll all suffer in silence. And until that position is restored, then we'll all be just kind of just in a place that doesn't serve us, because you can't be whole. And when you can't be whole, you can't be happy. You'll
that's
find
true.
moments and fragments of happiness, but it's fleeting. And so when I understood this, I was like, oh man, we're gods, like we're the goddesses. Like
You
you
got
can't,
it.
like creation is not creation without a woman. Like you can't have creation without having a woman. So I started to understand who I was. I started to understand my place in it all and what my role was, which is to share this information that our wombs are not just designed to have children. They're designed for something way, way, way more powerful, and that's transmutating. That's an incubation chamber. When something goes in it, it doesn't come out the same. We are, uh, I was looking at the word mother the other day, and I was like, creating an acronym with it. And I was like, master of the ethereal realm, and you're just like creating. I was like, wow, a mother is really a master of the elements and the unseen, because she takes, where were we before we were in her womb? We were
Exactly.
vibrations.
Hmm.
So we have the ability to take vibration and make it into an embodied form. That's that's powerful.
That's very powerful. And then that kind of lets you understand how we got to the position that we're in. Because, you know, that's awesome. Like that's magnificent. Not that we're running around saying, "Hey, look at how magnificent I am." It just is the order of nature and the way that things were. There was no hierarchy and dominance, when we
No.
were in complete rule, of everything. Everything was harmony. Everything worked together, with nature, with the animals, with the cosmos, in alignment with that. It was a much more spiritual existence, and experience of life. And that's why you had some of these older indigenous tribes that didn't have half the technology that we have, that were so connected to astrology and all these other different forms of metaphysics, because it's all interconnected. And that's what you
Yes.
just talked about. And, you really floored me when you said that. I'm sitting here still stuck on the part that we're not supposed to be bleeding. I'm like, wait a minute.
Honey,
So you stopped at 36 and that was it? Like you never went back to.
I haven't bled since, honestly. I have not bled since. And the more I started researching into it, the more I started to uncover because spirit was just
Oh
like,
my God,
here,
girl.
here, here. Right. And it's not that I couldn't have children. We
Right.
have been taught that bleeding is synonymous with being fertile, and it's not. Ovulation is fertility. So I was still
Hmm.
ovulating. I just wasn't bleeding. And
How nice.
it was. And I was just like, people aren't going to believe me, you know? And then when
Right.
I posted my first video, this was a few years back before the world was ready to hear this. It got thousands of views, and other women actually coming out and saying, you know what? When I changed my diet, I stopped bleeding as much too. You know what? When I made this change, this happened to my menstrual cycle. And I was like, and there it is. There's no research that talks about this because they don't want us to know. What
Right.
happens when we find out
Oh,
that
they lose hella money. Girl, they
exactly
lose so much money. Like those whole businesses would be shutting down. Like
$41 billion
Tampax.
industry?
Yep. Yeah, all of these they would be, yeah. Yeah. That's
And
wild. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, it's just that like some women can accept it and some women can't because they refuse to believe that they've been lied to their whole lives about what it means. And I'm not saying that bleeding is bad. I'm just saying that it's a communication. And this last video that I did, more women started saying, "Oh, well, is this why my body reacted and responded the way it does when I'm around this one man or when I'm around this person who makes me feel like this?" I'm like, absolutely. Because your body is speaking to you, it's letting you know who's allowed to enter and who isn't. And if you don't listen to it, yeah, you're going to have a heavier cycle that month. This is
Mhm.
something that we've been suppressing for so many years, like this information, this energy. And it's showing up louder and louder because why? There's more uterine diseases. Women are getting hysterectomies at the age of 20.
Yeah, I've been hearing that and I'm thinking, what?
Exactly.
If it's not
So
medically necessary and it's not, yeah.
what are they doing with all these wombs? There's my
Yeah.
cat over here playing.
Ooh, that's a real question right there. Yeah, mine's on the patio. She wants to get in. She ain't getting in.
Yeah,
So,
what are they
yeah.
doing with all of our wombs? You know,
Oh my
why
gosh.
what's the increase in all of these hysterectomies, and why are we getting younger and younger getting hysterectomies, and why is removing the womb the most viable solution? So yeah, these are all the questions that people are now starting to ask, and the information that I'm sharing is is pivotal at this moment.
Yeah, it is. And then like you talked about, the earth medicine, like how in the beginning you were talking about you started using the earth's medicine. We're going back to that because you can't trust this other stuff. Like you can't trust, everything's a lie. I'm one of these people that I already know they've been lying. So like when I hear you
Right.
say something, like I'm like, wait a minute, how come nobody ever told me? Like why am I just now finding this out? Um but you're right, because like who said that? Like even if you think about when they tried to some male's terminology would be, oh, it's a woman's curse. They would call it a curse, something
Right.
like that, and they made women hate this, and then they tried to tie it to just a lot of confusion around it, like it's a part of biology, and
Exactly.
um, I want to know what your take is on a woman that's supposed to be going through menopause. So if typically we shouldn't be bleeding if we weren't in survival mode. How does menopause, like like any parts of the menopause, fit in there? Because eventually the woman stops
Well,
bleeding then too.
and eventually, the woman's body learns to feel safe and she learns to conserve. And conservation is the goal because when we conserve our endometrial lining, it's called endometrial reabsorption. That's when the lining is reabsorbed back into the body, and you don't have to spend all that energy and all of that, break down all of that protein and start over rebuilding it again every single month. The body is able to take the constituents of that endometrial lining and reuse it for other energy sources in the body. And so that is conservation. That is the body working in harmony. Unless there's a hormonal imbalance and you can't afford to lose the endometrial lining, which you see in a lot of women with PCOS.
Mm.
So there's two paths though that the body takes. It's either going to reabsorb it or it's going to tear it out and break it down, tear it out. And we were never taught about those two pathways. We were only taught that there was one that was normal, and that was bleeding. That was the ultimate sign of female health. So we never questioned it. And who taught us this other than a man?
Right. Telling us about our body and our process.
Exactly. Because they don't know. They don't know
Yeah,
any better.
exactly.
So, from their perspective, it is a biological response because they don't know about the unseen. They don't know about how our emotions work. They don't understand our intuition. And there's some things that only we know about ourselves. So, when I started studying this, I was like, oh, they're completely lost on us. They have no clue how powerful we really are because we don't know
Yeah,
how powerful we really are. We're
that's right.
just learning that.
That's wild. Like,
So,
wow. I mean, I'm really getting educated. Like, seriously, like you're really breaking stuff down on a deeper level about the womb. Like this is your purpose. Like you are definitely um breaking down some really important information about the womb. Like I'm just like sitting here trying to be the host of the podcast and not be so caught up in that. But yeah, I'm like now I want to know more about that. Anytime I have somebody on here, then I'm like asking my ancestors like, how come I didn't know this? And they're like, you weren't ready to receive it. Like, now you are, and now we can give you more information in regards to that. So, I love how you talked about everything and you tie in everything in, especially with the hormonal imbalances as well, which being in survival mode will just create that, be having all kinds of other sorts of traumas of all sorts of types will create that. So, how can a woman, if she wants to began to go down this path of stopping that? Like, what are some of the things that she can do um, to try to regulate, get back to what's really natural?
well, and you did ask me, then I completely forgot to answer
It's
it. But
okay.
um, so one of the first things that I did was I changed my diet. And when I changed my diet, my thoughts started to change. So that interesting thing about hormones is that when your body feels better, your hormones change because
That's true.
hormones are not necessarily, you can't tell your hormones how to release. That's something that they do based on your energetic frequency and your state, your consciousness. That's something that they do based on your mood, how you feel, how you see yourself. This is what I call the 10 commandments because they are the commanders of your body based on your emotions. So whatever hormone you release is going to be the either dark shadow expression of the hormone or the light expression of the hormone. And I have a book on this called The Holy Body, the Light and Shadow Expressions of Hormones, which just means like cortisol can either make you attentive, make you aware, or it can make you stressed out and make you feel depleted. So
Hmm.
one is a shadow expression and one is a light expression. Um, but that comes with understanding the emotions. What I did after to help me understand this was I had to start doing the conscious breathing, meaning breathing in patterns. I would hold my breath for, or breathe in for 4 seconds. I would hold my breath for 4 seconds, and then I would exhale for 8 seconds. That started a pattern. Well, guess what happens when you start breathing in patterns? It controls the heart rate. The heart is what's responsible for sending out the vibration signal, because that has its own nervous system. Like the womb has its own nervous system. Um, the electromagnetic field of the heart is what sends the signals to the cells to tell them what to do, or to the hormones, and the hormones send the signal to the cells. So it's all connected. The breath controls
Mm-hmm.
the heart controls the hormone release, and the hormone controls what the cell message is. That was vital for me,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like now I have control over my body.
That's
Whenever
right.
I start feeling angry or anger or frustration, which is the shadow expressions, I can reverse that by intentionally saying, once I'm present, because I had to be present. But breath makes you present. When you start
Yes, it
focusing on
does.
your breath, your mind, you're literally grounding your mind back into your body. Our mind has a tendency to wander into the future or in the past. It's always focused on if, or what happened. But
Right.
very rarely are we in our bodies, feeling our bodies, and seeing where the pain is, seeing where the stagnation is, feeling the root of the discomfort. And when you start breathing, your heart rate starts to slow down, your brain frequency changes, and there's coherence. Everything is operating now on the same frequency, and they can communicate. When the communication channels are open, you can start introducing intention and have more control over what's going on inside. And that is where we can start making changes and start transforming our bodies.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, that was deep. That was right on too. Um, and something happened last month for me, and I was kind of, like you said, I started freaking out. Like, wait a minute, what's going on? How come I haven't had a period? Is this perimenopause? Like I was tripping out. Like the day that it should have came, it didn't really come. Like it was like maybe a day, and I was like, what's going on with that? And I had, like you said, I'm in a much better space emotionally, and I have been for a while. The way that I eat, the way that I take care of myself, the rest, finances are better. Just everything is in a much healthier, calmer space in my life. And then, of course, I started getting into my exercise again, my food, and then I incorporated something that was um, s- dealing with the circulation of my blood to like just remove toxins just on a whole round. So when this happened, I was freaking out. Like you said, wait a minute, what's going on? Something's wrong. It
right.
must be perimenopause. It must be this, and that. And then like 2, 3 weeks later, it came on and it was regular. And I was so I was like, what did I do? But you just explained all of that. And so, my body was probably trying to conserve and do something with it, but I went into survival and chaos and threw it right back into the other. But you know what? I'm glad to be having this conversation with you because after what you just said, I'm definitely going to work on that because I'm in a good space to be able to do that. I do my meditation in the morning. I know about the breathing. I have to before I go to work, like I got to do that before I deal with these people. Being in the present moment more frequently, just really tapping into that right brain side of things and reconnecting to that. And you make it sound so simple, but yeah, definitely I'm going to practice on that, and I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted. Let you
Please
know how that
do.
turns
And
out.
it's definitely not as simple as it may sound. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of literally having to change my habits,
Hmm.
like I have to make time specifically just to breathe now, because I'm like, okay, let me go in for my medicine, for my inspiration, and talk with my master, to let.
Hmm.
And it started to ring bells, as far as the Bible saying there should only be one master, no master over you, and that's yourself. You
That's
should
right.
not bow to the authority of anybody else, because we all have a soul. We know the soul is the sun. We all have our own sunrise and our own sunsets. And so anytime we listen to somebody else we start to take on their orbits.
That's
And we
right.
got a whole planet that we have to shine light on and orbit around, and that's our bodies, you know? So, just a fun fact here, and not really fun, but disturbing, is I read that in the 1890s, between 1890s and 1950s, young girls didn't start menstruating until the age of 17. Now
Mm.
the average menstruation age is 12.
You know what? I didn't start until I was 15, and my mother, here's the thing, all my friends were starting and they was telling me these horror stories. I was like, "No thanks, I'm good." Like over here. And my mother was like, "Something's wrong with her." And she took me to the doctor, a man, and he put me on birth control pills. And that I know, and that kick started my period. So I never started my period or bleeding naturally. And
Naturally, yeah.
me and birth control pills never got along. Though what it did to my hormones was I had to stop taking them. I think like before I had my first child, like and I had her at 19. So I had to stop taking them like because it would give me blood clot. Like it just never jived with me and my hormones. And so I'm grateful that I wasn't on any of that stuff, but I could see how it shifted things inside
Yeah.
of me that wasn't natural. And I didn't like that. And I used to think to myself, why didn't you just let nature do what nature was gonna do? Like, why did you force me to go into this with y'all? Like.
Think about it. When do they ever, even when we get ready to give birth, they want to induce our labor. They
Yeah,
don't allow any of our natural rhythms to happen naturally, and they disrupt it and say something's wrong with us, and then they cause us to bleed.
right.
So it's really like this whole, oh, we've been misled our whole lives, type of thing, because God forbid we know how powerful we are.
Yeah,
God forbid how we know how our cycles are in alignment with the moon
that's
phases,
right.
literally. So it's all this suppression of knowledge about ourselves that again causes most of the suffering. But this is the rise of the feminine. This is the time.
Yay.
It is. It
It's
really is.
crazy
It's
out
the
there. We
phoenix.
need a
The
and
phoenix
I
is
love this.
rising.
And you're one of them. I'm just going to say that. Rise of the divine feminine. Go ahead and take your place around the sister circle because you are really breaking it down. Like and so, yes, we are rising as divine feminine. I'm here for it. Everybody's got their place, and like I said, you're really doing some amazing work, and that's what attracted me to you at first. Is when I heard you talking, like you were saying, how do we know this, and that? You really were doing some thought-provoking questions about the womb and womb health, and so I'm glad I was able to get you on the podcast. I know there's going to be a lot of women that appreciate this because you've been breaking it down and you've been tying it in to the mind, body, spirit connection. And I like how you're even incorporating some of the metaphysics of the Bible. That's actually the next class I'm doing in September, which is really exciting, like breaking down some of those teachings on a metaphysical level. But that brings me to your experience with sacred geometry because it is all interwoven. So I want to hear about that like with you and like how that got started and how you're using that and how it applies to it all.
Well, it's when I was explaining the Vesica Piscis earlier. That is the intersection between two circles overlapping. That's what makes the Vesica Piscis. It is the fish that we know of so well that they used to represent Christ, what they call Jesus, is really the representation of Christ consciousness because everything that comes from one plane or from the vibrational plane into this plane comes through a Vesica Piscis. And when we start realizing that it is again the shape of the womb of the woman's vagina, um, we have two breasts that are circular, and it's built in our body. But where it probably really makes a difference is understanding how when we speak about, let's just say, these saviors, and I'll use Jesus as an example. Jesus was the considered a carpenter. Well, when you start breaking down architect in Latin, it means carpenter. It has nothing to do with building things out of wood. It's about how the temple was designed, how it was designed to house something divine, which is spirit. And the way that this holy temple is designed is by understanding where the crossing points are, which is where I was telling you earlier about the left brain and the right brain crossing over. Knowing how to harmonize that balance is what builds the temple, what allows you to have a divine vessel that has no stagnation, no resistance to spirit. So when I say spirit, I'm talking about breath, I'm talking about airflow through the body. Well, when it can move through the body freely and all of your channels are open, then spirit is able to actually move you, is able to um, show you things that you would never be able to see. It's able to open up doorways that you would never be able to open, and this is where we call miracles start taking place in this state, in this level of consciousness. Things that you just knew could never happen, but they start happening. And that tells us how much we create our own problems with the way that we think. I was saying in one of my videos, like, you can't solve a problem with the same mindset that created the problem in the first place.
That's
So
right.
how do you get to the mindset that creates the solution? Well, you have to be inspired to create solutions to problems. And inspiration, literally breathing in, is called inspiring.
Mm,
It's called inspiration. So we have to start looking at the power of our words and taking them literally for what they are. The word is creative. It is the movement of spirit. It is the word is carried by breath. You can't get a word out without breath carrying it. So when the words match what our heart frequency says, and we're not pretending and we're being authentic, and we're able to express who we are no matter who's watching, the
yep.
same as when we're by ourselves, that is when we start being inspired. That is when we can actually create, like I said, coherence. That's building the divine temple brick by brick. Because think about it, your word is your bond or your
Hmm.
bondage. It's going to be your credit. In the past, they used to be able to just do handshakes on someone's word. It was
That's right.
powerful. When your word aligns with who you are, it's very powerful. And that is what creates a divine temple. So, understanding how powerful your words are, whether you're saying them to yourself or saying them to someone else, but it's really about what you're telling yourself.
Yep.
If you're telling yourself one thing and you're not sticking to it and you're not doing it, that's that's conflict.
It
That,
is.
that's the beginning of the war. That's the beginning of discord. That's the fall, because your
Yep.
word is your strength. And if your word doesn't match what you think you are, if you're telling yourself one thing and doing another, that is how we start breaking ourselves down and
That's
building a
right.
temple that's on what, sand
Yep.
versus stone.
Yep.
That's you build a divine temple. You make sure that you walk in your word. And that's one thing that I quickly learned. The more I told myself I was going to do something and I didn't do it and I didn't complete it, the more I started to like be out of sync with everything. But the minute
Yep.
I started doing what I said I was going to do and not lying to myself about the things that I needed to fix inside of myself, not pretending that I was okay and
Yeah.
still going to this job that I knew I hated and pretending to be okay when people ask me, "How are you?" I'm fine. No, I wasn't, you
Right.
know? But it's so simple that we don't even think about those little things. That's lying to ourselves.
Yep.
And that creates our minds to be out of sync. That creates discord between the left and the right hemisphere. That's what we call conflict, inner struggle, inner war, whatever you want to call it. It creates what's called A double, a
Mm.
devil. It creates the devil. It creates two conflicting realities.
Yep, and that's what I was going to say. It creates two timeline versions of yourself. And now you have a choice whether you're going to live in the lower frequency or the higher frequency instead of it being in alignment, in soul alignment. Girl, that was deep. Like you really broke it down because that's one of the things that really started to change things for me. And on a simpler level, some people may just understand it as just being honest, like really being honest with yourself first. You can't be honest with other people without being honest with yourself
And
because you're going to always be trying to show up as something else. It's the masks that we wear. So when you talked about that and being the same way everywhere, that authenticity, that is that soul integrated alignment. And that's how I am. I'm the same everywhere. Like I'm the same at work. And that really floors them. When you're dealing with people who don't live like that and that's not their code, they're looking at you like, why are you not in the matrix, like in the box, like, and I'm like, honey, I don't live like that. I know who I am and I move with soul and with spirit, like you said. I'm conversing with my spiritual counsel, my higher self before I'm doing stuff. So, and that's just a better way to live. And that is what I described as recently, like really integrating all of that. I'm no longer in these split timelines, like you said. I'm no longer one way doing this and, oh, I know I shouldn't be doing that. Or, you know what, I'm just going to tell this person this so that they think that's the conflict. Like you said, that is war. It really is.
it's duality at its best.
Yeah.
It's literally what creates a duality, like you said, a double, a second person. And double and devil is synonymous. It's
Hmm.
not that there's this existing entity that just wants to hurt and harm and deceive us. We're deceiving ourselves and we're blaming it on something on the outside. And that's where religion is able to take hold of people. Ones who don't want
Hmm.
to take responsibility for their own actions and blame it on something else that's controlling them, or made them do it. But it's really us just not being honest with ourselves. And what's at the root word of
Yep.
honesty? Honor. We have no
Hmm.
honor anymore. We don't understand what honor is because we've been taught and fed into the culture. It's
Hmm.
embedded into our culture to put on a mask. When you see someone on set getting ready to go and perform, they go into wardrobe, they go into makeup, and then they go on set. Well, what happens every time a woman wants to go out? We go into wardrobe, we go into makeup, and then we go perform. So they
Yep.
teach it into our culture, and we're doing it and acting it out and behaving it without even realizing what we're doing.
Yep. Yep, and that's because, like you said, there's that conflict between the right and the left brain. It's not taught. People have no kind of idea about connecting in with the spiritual side of their self. Everybody's just doing and surviving. And a lot of that has to do with what you talked about before by getting away from that divine feminine principle and way of living. Oh man, you really broke it down. You like broke it down all the way around. And I had no idea we were going to go from who told you were supposed to bleed to all of this. To like to like I went plant-based and then boom, like, and that's why it's so interconnected. And like I said, the name of this podcast is Holistic and Spiritual AF, because it's all about the mind body spirit integration, and there's different components to that. And you talked about how the discipline that it takes, number one, of really deprogramming, because that's what a lot of it is a lot of people say, oh yeah, I want that, I want to be like that. It takes some discipline and it takes some deprogramming of everything. Like just get ready for that, because as soon as you think, oh yes, I figured that out, now I got, and then something else surface, and then you have more understanding and awareness of something else. So yeah, I love how you talked about everything, the divine temple, how to build that brick by brick. I don't think I've ever heard anybody break that down like that either, the duality of the two timeline people. That's you.
Spirit just taught me that, honestly. And it's the authenticity is synonymous with the feminine coming back, because being honest and being true to who you are
Yep.
is what women are were typically known for. We were considered wild. We were
Mhm.
considered, and I just learned recently that horns were originally associated with women and they were considered divine, and they turned it into something evil. So it's a lot that's resurfacing that has been deeply embedded in our ancestral cultural practices that were shamed and shunned, and it's starting to now make a comeback, and we're beginning to understand things a different way than how we've always looked at it. There are no accidents,
No.
even though it seems like there's so much going on in the world. I know that we went through this for a reason, and
Hmm.
that was to make us stronger and to make us more resilient so that we could never get ourselves put in this position.
I'm telling you, I don't think this is. I literally was having this conversation with my ancestors yesterday, my cosmic family. I'm like, when we get out of this, like, is this gonna happen again? They were like, no. I was like, I think everybody learned their lesson on this one. Like, everybody around the world was like, no. But you're right. Like, it needed to. I think a certain amount of it needed to happen in order for us to evolve in consciousness as well. We need to step up. There's other conscious beings on other planets and star systems that are way more advanced on a consciousness level than we are, so I think it needed to happen in order for us to A, make sure this don't happen again, and B, for us to all elevate and rise in consciousness and realize what's going on. But when you break it down like that, a person can't help but to think, you know why in the world would they go through so much trouble to try to make her small, or to make spirituality not as important, So once you start deprogramming and listening to this stuff, there's got to be some truth there. And that's something worked in overtime to try to make everybody just go to work, like just go to work. Don't ask questions, and then we'll give you this religiosity concept where you never have to look inside. You always are looking out there, and something is going to save you. Like, it's just too damn easy, y'all. Just,
We took the
too,
bait.
we took the bait. It's too easy. No, you got to put a little work into it, guys. And like you said, just starting with breathing, just starting with being present, and just starting with connecting to that inner realm on a different level.
Yep, just
Awesome.
connect to the body. That's it.
Yeah.
Literally connecting with your body, having a body day where you say, okay, babe, body, how do you feel? How do my toes feel? How do my knees feel? How do my legs feel and my thighs? And like literally put your mind at every part of your body and ask it, how do you feel? And it's gonna talk. It's gonna start talking because
Hmm.
it's conscious. Like you have a living organism here.
Yep.
This is a living organism, organism on top of a living organism, which is the
Yep.
earth. You can't have something that grows trees and grows food, and it can't connect and communicate with you without being alive. Like that just doesn't happen. So the more I started hanging out in nature, the more I started um, just using or relying more on natural light rhythms from the sun and just laying flat on the ground, I started noticing things like different herbs would start popping up out of
Yes.
I was laying at that were just perfect for whatever I needed. And it's just I was like, wow, the earth listens.
Yeah.
When you put your feet on the ground or when you lay on the ground, it's a connection, it's a communication. And the more I did that, the less I became corporate America,
I know
the
that's
less
right.
to exist in it, the more I started repelling um, things that just didn't align with me anymore. And I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna make it, but spirit, will help me find a way. And I trusted it and relied on it. And there, that grew my business. Like that's what started my business is just taking the first step, and the rest of the path lit up. It didn't all light up at once. Like
Right.
you can drive from Alabama to California from one side of the country to the other with just headlights without seeing the whole path. You only need to see what's right in front of you. And that's how spirit works.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Kiana, thank you, thank you. It has been a pleasure. Like I said, this I know the audience is going to love you so much. Tell us how we can find you and the types of work that you're doing to help women outside of here.
Well, I do host from time to time womb wisdom healing classes on my website at nourishment101.com. But I have a recorded session on there now of one of my latest classes so that, anytime someone that doesn't have time to catch one of my healing sessions, they can just go watch that recorded healing session. I also developed an app. It's not on the app market yet. It is on nourishment101.com, but the app is basically designed by not just my thought, but a collection of all the women who commented on my TikTok pages who wanted some help with whatever. I incorporated that into the app. So there's healing meditations in there. There's with breath work, guided breath work by me. There's also a hormonal balancing app that tells you which hormone you're dominant in and if it's expressing its shadow or light expression. um there, and trust me, I don't know how I built this app.
I do. I know exactly how you did it. And I love this for you and I love this for us, I because oh my God, I just love this Rise of the Divine Feminine. You go, girl. I am so proud of you.
But it's called womb wisdom, and it has things in there that are very helpful to women, even allowing us to catch hormone imbalances, or womb imbalances before they happen, letting us know if we're showing signs of like a certain disease. There's so much in there. So I encourage women to go check it out and test it out for me before it goes on the app stores. Um, and I also do one-on-ones. So if anyone wants a private session, they can definitely book one from my website as well.
Awesome, awesome. I love it. And so y'all heard that. First of all, you already know that Kiana knows what she's talking about. Number one, through experience. Like really, you could have a doctor, Dr. Kiana on there. You don't need the Western's, terminology and schooling for that because you are divinely appointed. You've learned from the earth and you've learned from your womb wisdom and experience and all the women that you've helped. And so there's just a tremendous amount of a wealth of information that you bring. So make sure y'all check her out on nourishment101.com. Ladies, check out the Womb Wisdom app. I'm super excited. I know this is just the beginning. That's going to grow into something wild like we do. And I'm excited for you. I'm going to check that out myself as well. And then, of course, make sure you follow Kiana on TikTok and Instagram. She's really doing some amazing things at Kiana Verse on both TikTok and Instagram. And of course, I will always have all this information down in the description so that you can keep up with her as well as find me and what we're going to be doing as far as classes coming up. So once again, this has been a phenomenal episode, and I really, really appreciate having you. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll see you around on them TikTok streets.
It was an honor being here. And again, thank you so much for holding space for this message and for our divine communion. Because to me, this is therapy. This just connects.
Yes.
So I appreciate you too, Goddess.
Oh, you are so welcome. That's it, y'all. Until the next episode.